Kia ora te whānau, ko Andrew Doubleday tēnei. And this is a message for the 19th of June. The Gospel reading in the lectionary is Luke chapter 8 verses 25 through to 39. Not necessarily an easy passage, but we'll give it a go today. Luke chapter 8 verse 26. Then they arrived at the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. As he stepped out on land, a man of the city who had demons met Jesus. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he did not live in a house but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he fell down before him and shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the God Most High? I beg you, do not torment me." For Jesus had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many times it had seized him, but he was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles. But he would break the bonds and be driven out by the demon into the wilds. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. They begged him not to order them to go back into the abyss. Now there was on the hillside, a large herd of swine that was feeding, and the demons begged Jesus to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake, and it was drowned. When the swineherd saw what had happened, they ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came out to see what had happened, and when they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told them how the one who had been possessed by demons had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." So he went away, proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. This is the thorny issue of demonic possession. I have to say up front that it's outside of my experience. I'm not denying that it's not real. I'm simply saying it's not something that I've encountered or had to have anything to do with. It is very prevalent, though, we see in the gospel narratives, particularly the synoptics. It's a key part of Jesus' ministry. Again and again we read that he went about driving out demons and healing the sick. It is a key part in Matthew, Mark and Luke. In John, however, the references are really to religious leaders claiming that Jesus was demon-possessed. And so we have this a bit of a difference because it doesn't figure otherwise in John's Gospel. And the interesting thing as I started to explore this is in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, it's almost entirely absent. I could only find 2 cases in the whole of it. Now there may be more, but I've not come across them. Only 2 cases. And both of them were sent by God. One of them, most well-known one, concerns Saul. And so it doesn't appear anywhere strongly, it seems, but in the Gospels. Even the New Testament letters, it doesn't figure. And I wonder what we are to make of this. Part of me wonders whether it was something that was seen, interpreted in a particular way in the first century. And I'll tell you why. What makes me think that is that I've been going to a doctor for supervision on a regular basis for a good number of years now. Now, he trained as a psychiatrist, and at the last moment he did not sit the final exams for reasons of his own. He still works in a psych hospital in the mental health area, but not as a consultant psychiatrist. And he just made a comment to me a couple of years ago. He said, it's interesting how we do not see catatonia today. People who are catatonic, it's almost unheard of. Yet round the turn of the 20th century, over 100 years ago, it was actually quite common. There was a kind of almost an epidemic of it. You'd expect to see it, and it happened. Today, extremely rare. Extremely rare. And I just pop that in there because I wonder if there's a sense of expectation in what we are seeing, and maybe things that we see we're describing in different ways. Remembering that the New Testament, that the whole of Scripture really was written for people of the day to be able to understand what they were actually seeing themselves, the words that they put to describe it. I mean, even over the last 100 plus years, our language has changed to describe things. We have a phenomenon that takes many of us out ultimately, and that's a stroke. And we know what a stroke is and what it looks like. 120 years ago, it came under a different name. It was called apoplexy. And you think, oh, well, that doesn't sound very nice. And it probably wasn't. We have different ways of describing things. And I'm wondering if there's something of that that's going on here. I am not saying that demon possession isn't real. I'm suggesting that it may not be as common as some people even today would have us to believe. I was pastor of a mildly charismatic church, having come in with no experience of the charismatic renewal, for 26 years. And although it was often talked about, I never saw it. Maybe I just didn't have the eyes to see, but I never saw it and never found myself in a position where I had to deal with it. I know the Catholic Church have people who are specially trained as exorcists, but there's a very small number of them, because I imagine the cases that they have to deal with are very small. And yet here we see Jesus in this first century in the business of dealing with whatever it was that we see then described as demonic possession, because Jesus is in the business of setting people free. Remember what he said he came for? I've come that you might have life and have it in all its fullness. So Jesus is in the business of liberating people, of setting free them from whatever it is that holds them, whatever it chains them, whatever it is that keeps them small and less than what they can be. So here we see him in the country of the Gerasenes. Now, where was this? Now, this was down the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee, opposite the side where Jesus grew up in Nazareth, and right on the other side, and it's more often identified as Gentile territory. So who were the people who were there? Gentiles, Jews, or a mixed people? My hunch is probably the latter. One of the issues we discover is that pork seems to be a significant industry in this land. And I guess it's because pigs are relatively easy to raise. You can feed them on your rubbish and they still get fat. The difficulty was that for Jewish people, pigs were unclean. Pork was an unclean animal. Self-respecting Jewish people did not raise pigs. And that may be an indicator that the people there were not Jewish. On the other hand, it may be an indicator that there were also a good number of Jews among them who, although they did this knowing it was wrong, felt embarrassed, ashamed, guilty and uncomfortable about it, which may explain the reaction, which we come to in just a minute. You see, because it was unclean, on the one hand it could indicate that these people were not Jewish, on the other hand it indicate that they were. And this is why they were terrified of Jesus. They wanted him gone. This is one of the most unusual parts of the story. And you almost got the impression that they were more scared of Jesus than they were of what he'd just healed. They would rather have had the demon-possessed man and their pigs than Jesus setting this man free. Jesus terrified them. And that's the sense of the words that he used in this particular passage. And I've wondered, why would that be? Perhaps they're seeing Jesus through the lens of their own sin. They're seeing Jesus through the eyes of fear. Yet, oddly we might think, Jesus has a measure, surely he has compassion for them. Because we discover, I think, that he has a measure of compassion even for the demons. He acceded to their request that he didn't send them directly back to the abyss, which was presumably some sort of prison, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But that he sent them into the pigs, which, okay, he did. And maybe you could say, well, he was killing two birds with one stone. He was getting rid of both the demons and the pigs. Well, I'm not so sure that it was that simple. Like the people, the demons believe that Jesus is there to torture them. Why have you come to torture us? Why have you come to torment us? And I just wondered, where did they get that idea from? Where do we get that idea from? Where did these people get that idea from? It's because they're seeing Jesus and what Jesus is doing through the lens of their own sin, shame, guilt and fear. In 1 Peter 3:19, it tells us that after his death, presumably for his resurrection, Jesus goes to preach to the spirits in prison. I wonder if Legion was there when he went. These very spirits, presumably, that Jesus goes to offer grace to, offer an opportunity for a fresh beginning, to leave behind the way in which they have been existing. It's a thought, eh? Why would he do that if he didn't care? Even for demons. Giving them another chance, a fresh go, a new possibility for how they might be in the future. And why would he be any different for these people? And what about us? Do we see Jesus? Do we see God through the eyes of our own fear, through the eyes of our own sin? Do we really at some deep level imagine that if Jesus were standing in front of us, he would only want to condemn us, only want to punish us, only want to torture us, rather than seek to set us free, to restore us, to renew us, to give us life and abundance? It's a question that's worth asking ourselves. How much are we like Adam and Eve in the garden story, when they'd stuffed up their inclination, their immediate inclination was to run away and hide, which is what they did. They didn't want to see God. They didn't want God to see them. They just felt so scared now at this point. They were now seeing God through the eyes of their own sin, their own guilt, their own shame, rather than through the possibility of God's love, which they had been living on and living in for we don't know how long. How much are we like Legion, expecting the worst from Jesus? How much are we like the Gerasenes people, expecting judgment, rather than recognizing that Jesus wants a new beginning for all of us, inviting us to step beyond the messiness and dysfunction of our current existence into a life with him, a life like this man who'd been set free from the torment in which he lived. Imagine how awful that would have been. He is now clothed, and more than just physically. He's clothed in a healed mind. He's clothed in serenity and in peace. He is clothed in joy. And my conviction is that Jesus would find each of us yearning for that same kind of clothing, because it's what he wants for us all. God bless you.